So today we are going to be making a pinch cup, and to give you an idea about the amount of clay you should be starting with, about the size of your sponge, just a little bit thicker and a little bit smaller in diameter, about the size of a mandarin orange. You also need a needle tool and I think a red rib, although there are other ribs out there, but I like this one because it's just a little bit more flexible. Now, I need to start by shaping the clay, and I'm using my hand to act as kind of like a mold. And I'm just pressing the clay into it. Starting with a really good foundation is important. It's like the foundation of a house. If you had an odd foundation, the house would crumble around it. So you want to make sure this is really strong. It's worth the time and the effort to make sure that the cracks are sealed, that you've shaped it well, so that you can build on top of it. Now the bottom of it is like cone shaped because of my hand. So I'm going to turn that over and I'm going to tap it down because that's going to be my foot eventually. And I also put a piece of paper down so this turns. Some people like to use like a Lazy Susan, or we have banding wheels at my house, but you can also just get by with a piece of paper that turns. So I'll do that today for you. I'm going to put my thumb in the center now so it looks a bit like a donut, and I don't want to go all the way to the bottom. I want to leave about a 1/4 to 1/2 inch thick foot. Oh, that was at an angle. Let's open that up just a little bit and take a better look. There we go. And I'll test that, see how thick this is. And it is a little bit more than a 1/2 inch. And so I think I could go down just a little bit more. Now I'm going to pinch my thumb towards my index fingers and my other fingers and just kind of pinch to move that clay up. When you squeeze, the clay has no choice but to move up. The angle of my hand is very important. If my angle of my hand goes like this, the clay will then go into this cavity here, making a bowl or a plate. So instead, I want to have my hand at a little bit of an angle. If I have it completely vertical, it will go straight up. If I want to go in, I change the angle of the hand to move my fingers inward. So really, you direct where the pot's going when you're making this. I'm going to go all the way around in a circle. I like to hold the clay in my hands, but if you want it to turn, you can do that pretty easily. So I am pinching around the bottom, and you can see the angle of my hand stays completely the same every single circle around the pot. I move up just a little bit more each time, and I'm not pinching really hard. You can see that the marks are there, but they're not super deep. If you pinch too hard, you're going to get really thick and thin spots, and that might be hard to fix later. So start off easy, and you can always increase pressure when you need to. Okay, now this looks like a good start to it. I know the lip is uneven, but I don't want you to worry about that early because this is way too early to be worrying about that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the clay with the side of my thumb. And what I'm doing is moving the clay from the raised areas into the recessed areas and sliding the clay up a little bit further. So I'm thinning the walls and at the same time making them more consistent. And that's important because if you have really thick and thin spots, you could tear through, or it could just be a weak area that doesn't hold the wall as strong. That's the way it's looking here. Now on the inside, I still have some of those pinch marks. So I'm going to set that down. I'm going to take my red rib and I'm just going to get that damp, not super wet. I'm going to have my non-dominant hand on the outside, and I'm going to smooth this in a circular motion. And I do that all the way around a few times. And what's happening is, you can see how smooth it is now. I've moved the clay from the raised areas into the recessed areas, but I've also been compressing the bottom, which is really important, compacting all those particles so they don't want to crack on you later. This is a good start, but this is a great time for me to flip it over and then work on my foot. So the foot is going to be another important design component for your project, for your cup or mug. And what I'm going to do is start with my thumb in the center and my fingers on the outside, and I'm going to pinch, not very hard. I want to keep it around this thickness, same thickness as the lip probably, and I'm going to push all the way around. And then I'm going to kind of move this clay up as well. I'm going to pick that up to do that. Oh, that's much better. And so I'm really kind of distributing the clay. And that's kind of one of the best parts about clay, is that it moves. It's not so static like wood or metal, which I think are great mediums too, but they are different for sure. This is the easiest way to make a three-dimensional object, I think. Now, you can see the foot is a little inconsistent, so I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to give this another round with the rib, and get that looking good. And out here, I might just kind of use my finger to define that foot just a little bit more. I can do a little bit more to it later, but right now I just want to get this to a good stopping place, because then what we're going to do is let that foot set up to leather hard. Leather hard is a state in drying that I think is a lot like a chunk of cheddar cheese, and not just because I'm from Wisconsin, but because you can move the clay on the surface, you can cut it, you can slice it, but it doesn't really accept your fingerprints. Once this is leather hard, it will be the strongest it's going to be until it goes through a firing process. So we want to take advantage of that, get this to leather hard, so when we flip it over to build on top, it doesn't smush. But I do want to keep the lip wet so I can work on it, and I'm going to put down a piece of plastic and keep that lip kind of wrapped up so that it'll stay wet enough for me to continue working on while this sets up just a little bit. How long do you have to let it set up? Really depends on where you are, how humid the air is, how dry your house is. All those things are important contributors. So I would suggest checking on it every half hour, and then covering it up. If you leave it out like overnight, it's going to get too dry. It'll get to bone dry, and then there'll be too much of a difference between that foot and the other part. It'll probably chip and break. Okay, we'll set that aside.